Happy Monday morning, and welcome to the end of this playlist, the Winnipeg Jets. And for this Winnipeg Jets video, I will also cover the Atlanta Thrashers. The Thrashers came into the league in '99, and they paid their expansion fee, and everything went swimmingly at the gates at the beginning. Then things started to go kind of awry. Now, the belief is that the Atlanta just as a city, that market can't handle a hockey team. The first time around when the Flames moved, yes. There was some struggles to support the Flames. But with the Thrashers, really, it came down to the building and ownership. And that all fell apart. And when that fell apart, the NHL said, hey, we need to go somewhere. And they went to Winnipeg. Because Winnipeg had a building ready. They had owners ready. Everything was ready for a team. So Winnipeg should be very grateful to Atlanta in this situation. And this is why I lumped the Atlanta Thrashers in with the Winnipeg Jets. It's not meant to be an insult to the Winnipeg Jets. It's that it's the same team. And there are still members of that team who are in the organization 8 years later. So, franchise leaders will include Atlanta Thrashers. And Ilya Kovalchuk's at the top, 328 goals, 287 assists, 615 points. Prior to a trade which helped to sink the team in Atlanta. Not that I think it would still be there if Kovalchuk hadn't been traded. Blake Wheeler, 192 goals, 394 assists, 586 points. He'll pass Kovalchuk likely around the midway mark of this season. Brian Little, 215 goals, 301 assists, 516 points. Dustin Byfuglien, 122 goals, 294 assists, 416 points. Slava Kozlov, 145 goals, 276 assists, or 271 assists, 416 points. Mark Scheifele has 151 goals, 220 assists, 371 points. So Scheifele's going to move up this list by at least a couple more spots this year. Toby Enstrom, 54 goals, 254 assists, 308 points. Andrew Ladd, 139 goals, 166 assists, 305 points. Marian Hossa, 108 goals, 240 assists, 248 points. And Evander Kane, 109 goals, 113 assists, 222 points. And there are a number of players in this top 10 who played for both Atlanta and Winnipeg. Wins leaders, and we start with a guy who played for both, Andrei Pavlich, 152 wins. Connor Hellebuck, 117. Kari Lehtinen, 94. Johan Hedberg, 57. And Pasi Nurminen, who was a favorite of mine, even though I know he wasn't great for very long, 48. And if you're going, great, I don't remember him. Yeah, that makes sense. Coaching wins. Paul Maurice, 235. He is well and above everybody else. Bob Hartley, 136. Claude Noel, I should say, 90. No, 80 wins. John Anderson, 70, and Kurt Fraser with 64. Kurt Fraser, loved the guy as a player. Didn't last very long as a coach, though. No playoffs for the most part for this team, whether they're in Atlanta or Winnipeg. They've made the playoffs 4 times in 19 years. They've won a round once in 19 years, or at least in 1 year out of 19. Of course, they won 2 rounds that year, and outside of that, it's been a long dry spell for this organization as a whole. No cups, no finals, none. 1999 to 2011, they were the Atlanta Thrashers. Their highlight was making the playoffs in 2007, and they lost all 4 games in the playoffs that year. From 2011 until now, it's been a little bit more successful as a Winnipeg organization, and things look pretty good for the most part. But of course, we've seen over this summer that it looks like there's some erosion of the top-end talent on this team in order to stay under the cap, and that can be a problem going forward. Team captains. Their first season, it was Kelly Buchberger. 2000-2001, it was Steve Staios. 2001-2002, Ray Ferraro. 2002-2004, Sean McEachern. 2005-2007, Scott Mellenby. 2007-2008, Bobby Holik. 2009-2010, Ilya Kovalchuk. 2010 to 2016, it was Andrew Ladd. And from 2016 until now, it is Blake Wheeler. Top 10 picks, and there's a lot to choose from here, and this is one of those cases where you could say, the argument that you should just bottom out to get top draft picks. It doesn't always work. Their first year, they draft first overall. They get Patrick Stefan. We know that didn't necessarily work out very well, and we'll get into that when we get into trades. 2000, they drafted Danny Heatley at number 2. 2001, they drafted Kovalchuk at number 1. Kovalchuk and Heatley were major parts of this team for a while, and yet that success wasn't really there long term. Kari Lehtinen, 2002, he was drafted 2nd. 2003, drafting 8th, they get Braden Coburn. 2004, drafting 10th, Boris Volabik. 2008, drafting 3rd, Zach Bogosian. 2009, drafting 4th, Evander Kane. 2010, drafting 8th, Alexander Burmistrov. 2011, drafting 7th, Mark Scheifele. And that's where the Jets come in. He was the first Winnipeg Jet. And it was weird because at that draft, they didn't actually have Jets jerseys and logos ready. So he put on just a generic NHL jersey. 2012, drafting 9th, Jacob Trouba. 2014, drafting 9th, Nikolai Ehlers. And 2016, drafting 2nd, Patrick Laine. And there are a lot of star players you can name that are not listed as top 10 draft picks. Because overall, Winnipeg was just able to put together a very good team, very good young team. And they did it the right way this last 5 years. And of course, drafting Laine at number 2, and at the time I'm recording this, we're waiting to see how much money he's going to get over what term. One draft pick that doesn't show up here because he wasn't a top 10 was Kyle Connor. So it's not just about drafting well early, it's about drafting smart throughout the draft. This is something that's really important for teams that are trying to build that way. And we'll see how things work out for the Jets from here, whether we're talking about them being in the playoffs for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in a row, or if we end up in a situation where because of some guys making a ton of money, they don't have enough to go around for everybody else, and they have to go through some kind of a retool, which would be weird because honestly, they're a very young team, they're a very talented team, and it would be strange to see them going through anything like that right now. That being said, let us move on to the trades side of the board. And I'm glad this is the last team in the list because honestly, this is a much easier board for me to handle and to organize. June 18th, 1999, before they've played a game yet, Atlanta acquires Damian Rhodes from Ottawa for future considerations. The idea was that Rhodes was going to be their starter, and he was going to be a good goaltender, and he just needed to get out of Ottawa and have that chance. Didn't really work out very well. June 25th, 1999, Atlanta acquires the 1999 number 1 draft pick, which became Patrick Stefan, in exchange for agreeing they wouldn't draft a Sedin. So the Vancouver Canucks get a first-round pick in Daniel Sedin and a 2000 third-round pick as well. So Atlanta, right out of the gate, making a deal with the Devil and Brian Burke, and it's a deal that they lose. July 10th, 2000, Atlanta gets Steve Staios. New Jersey gets Futures. It's noteworthy because then Steve Staios is their captain that year. June 22nd, 2002, Atlanta gets Slava Kozlov and a 2002 second. Buffalo gets a 2002 second and third. So Kozlov, who has a hefty price tag at this point and looks like he's winding down his career, goes to Atlanta and actually plays really, really well in Atlanta. He clicks right away in Atlanta and has some very good years at the end of his career. So, kudos to Kozlov. August 23rd, 2005, Atlanta acquires Greg DeVries and Marian Hossa. Ottawa gets Danny Heatley. So this is a deal that gives Ottawa a guy who would score 50 goals for them a couple of times. Not just once, a couple of times. And Atlanta gets back a guy in Hossa that actually was pretty darn good. And it's a shame he didn't stay in Atlanta to play with Kovalchuk because, honestly, there were some good players in Atlanta. They just either didn't hold on to them or didn't know how to make it work. June 24th, 2006, Nico Kapanen and a 2006 7th are acquired by the Atlanta Thrashers in exchange for Yaroslav Modry and Patrick Stefan going to Dallas. And of course, Stefan would miss an empty net. And that would change history as we knew it. And it's the most famous missed empty net ever. I don't think it's close. I still think that's the most watched clip of a guy missing an empty net ever. February 24th, 2007, Atlanta acquires Alexei Zhitnik and Philadelphia acquires Braden Coburn. And this was Atlanta being kind of short-sighted, trading their top draft pick, Coburn, young defenseman, in exchange for Zhitnik, who was a little bit over the hill at that stage. It's a trade that they'd end up regretting, but this is the kind of thing that happens when you're anxious to finally show your fans you're getting somewhere. This is 2006. This is 7 years after expansion. February 25th, 2007. Nope. Yeah, February 25th, 2007. So the Zhitnik trade's in 2007 as well. Sorry, I said 2006. So 8 years after expansion, Keith Tkachuk is acquired by Atlanta. St. Louis gets Glenn Metropolitan, a 2007 first, which became Mikhail Backlund, and a third as well as a 2008 third-round pick. And then St. Louis also had a first-round pick in there, which they then traded back to Atlanta because they got Keith Tkachuk back after that. So, just for renting Tkachuk, it was kind of a steep price to pay, in that Backlund's still in the league, playing for the Flames. It's that Backlund. So, yeah, it's one of those deals you look at and you think, well, Atlanta was trying. And Keith Tkachuk, the idea was they were adding Keith Tkachuk, and here we go, we're going to do something in the playoffs, and then they got swept in the first round. February 26, 2008, a year later, and everything starts to fall apart. Atlanta gets Colby Armstrong, Eric Christensen, Angelo Esposito, and a 2008 first. Oh, remember Angelo Esposito, friends? Pittsburgh gets Pascal Dupuis and Marian Hossa, and Dupuis, who's kind of the afterthought in this trade, becomes a pretty darn good player for Pittsburgh, and Hossa, of course, would be part of a run to the finals for Pittsburgh before signing in Detroit, so he could go to the finals with Detroit before signing in Chicago, where he finally wins in that Stanley Cup final. July 1st, 2009, Atlanta acquires Pavel Kabina and Tim Stapleton. Toronto gets Garnet Exelby and Colin Stewart. This was an attempt by Toronto to get tougher. We've got to be tougher. And Kabina had been a favorite target for fans and media alike for some issues and mistakes made on that blue line. So him being gone wasn't entirely a surprise, although Exelby going back kind of was. February 4th, 2010. This is the big one. This is the one that causes all of the issues that lead to this team ending up being moved. And what happens here is that the New Jersey Devils get Kovalchuk. Kovalchuk is finally on his way out. He really, honestly, Kovalchuk gave it the most that he could for the Atlanta Thrashers and gave them a long time to get better. The number one draft pick in 2001. It's 2010 when he finally kind of says he's done. He kind of wants to win something. So he's traded to New Jersey with Anssi Salmela. 2010 second, which became John Merrill. He now of the Vegas Golden Knights. Going to Atlanta, Nicholas Bergfors, Patrice Cormier, Johnny Oduya. A 2010 first, which became Kevin Hayes. And a second. And yeah, that's kind of where that ends up. They did not get enough back. And it was known at the time they didn't get enough back. When that trade went down, everybody had the same reaction of, that's all it took for Kovalchuk? That's it? And whether it was teams were lowballing Atlanta because they knew Atlanta had to get rid of him, or whatever it was, it just fell apart. It just didn't work. So, yeah, this was a tough time, and I really think this is what sunk the Atlanta Thrashers. See, the building issue and the ownership issue were part, but also this team was really poorly managed. So it's not like there was a whole lot of success you could look back on if you were an Atlanta fan, and there's not a whole lot you could look at if you're a prospective owner where you go, yeah, I want to keep the team in Atlanta. Look at all the success. So that just wasn't there. And that trade really kind of accelerated this team's just complete and total failure. February 9th, 2010, Atlanta acquires Ivan Vishnevsky in a 2010 fourth. Dallas gets Kari Lehtinen. So Lehtinen, who'd been dealing with a lot of injuries, had never really reached his potential in Atlanta. They wanted to just be rid of him, and Dallas needed a goaltender. So Lehtinen ends up becoming that guy for them. June 23rd, 2010, and this is where they kind of take advantage of Chicago having no cap space. Atlanta has a lot because Kovalchuk's gone. June 23rd, Atlanta acquires Akim Aliu. Dustin Byfuglien, Ben Eager, and Brent Sopel. Chicago gets Joey Crabb, Jeremy Morin, Marty Reasoner, that 2010 first, which became Kevin Hayes, and the second rounder, which they had acquired from New Jersey as well. This is a nice deal for the Atlanta Thrashers, which we're still seeing the benefits of now. Dustin Byfuglien, as a Jet, could you see him playing anywhere else? I would argue yes. You could see him in Chicago if they didn't have this cap snafu. But, yeah, no. He's a Jet, and that's where he belongs, and it starts with that deal. So, while it sucks that they lose Kovalchuk, and I think that hurt him, I think long-term, Byfuglien proves to be a pretty solid force on that blue line. July 1st, 2010, Atlanta gets Andrew Ladd. Chicago gets Ivan Vishnevsky in a 2011 second, which became Adam Clendenning. So, again, going to Chicago, and you don't have cap space? We'll take Ladd off your hands. So, Andrew Ladd comes in, plays for a while, ends up being your Winnipeg Jets captain when they come over from Atlanta. So, again, that tie is there. So, when I see people saying, don't mention Atlanta and Winnipeg together, why? It's the same team. It's weird. February 18th, 2011, Atlanta acquires Mark Stewart and Blake Wheeler. Boston gets Rich Peverly and Boris Valavic. And yes, I will still defend this deal because Peverly, pretty solid player in that 2012 run to the 2011 run to the Stanley Cup. And Peverly's career was shortened by injury, but he was a decent enough player. And Blake Wheeler, I don't think that relationship between him and the Bruins was going to work out anyways. Eventually, I'm going to do a career of Blake Wheeler video, and we can get into it then. But he got traded, and I think it was best for him. I think it was best for the Bruins as well. So, yeah, and you look at where the Bruins are at, and definitely when they've had cap problems over the last 7 years, he would have been sacrificed anyways for cap issues, even if that hadn't happened then. So, there you go. Now we move to moves made by the Winnipeg Jets, and we move forward quite a bit. Because actual consequential trades, there's not a whole lot of them made by Winnipeg. So February 11th, 2015 is the first one on the board with Winnipeg, and that's why it's in red. The Jets get Brendan Lemieux, Yoel Armia, Drew Stafford, Tyler Myers, and a 2015 first-round pick, which became Jack Roslovic. Buffalo gets Jason Kasdorf, Zach Bogosian, and Evander Kane. So Buffalo gets the best player in Evander Kane in this trade. Lemieux, pretty decent third line guy, I think with some top six potential, maybe. Armia, of course, gets sacrificed later on. We'll get to that trade. Myers just signed with Vancouver this offseason. And, of course, Roslovic, we don't know what his ceiling is. We may find out if Connor and Laine end up holding out into the season and Roslovic's forced into a more prominent role with the team. That can come back and bite players that hold out too. Because a young guy can step in sometimes and go, hey, look, I'm being given an offer to play on the first or second line that I wouldn't have got if they were here, so thanks. And then he puts up a bunch of points, and then there's no pressure on the team then to bring those players back. So it can cut both ways, where you can say, oh, the team's going to sink without him. Yeah, sometimes the players just end up sitting out because teams like, we don't really need him. June 24th, 2016, Winnipeg gets a 2016 first, which became Logan Stanley. And a third, Philadelphia gets a 2016 first, which became German Rubtsov. And a second-round pick. So we don't know yet whether they win, they lose this trade, or it doesn't matter because neither of those prospects, neither of those first-rounders have played in the NHL yet. Logan Stanley is still seen as at least a couple of years out. We'll see. We'll see what happens with him. June 21st, 2017, Winnipeg gets a 2017 first, which became Vesalainen. Vegas gets a 2017 first, which became Nick Suzuki, and a 2019 third. So, of course, Suzuki's now been moved off to Montreal in the Pacioretty trade. And Vesalainen, he's another one that if you're looking for a guy in Winnipeg's training camp, who might be like, oh, look, there's an opening in the top 6 spot because Laine and Connor haven't signed yet. Vesalainen's one of those ones who may have the talent to be able to step in there and help out. This can definitely be a situation where players look back later and they regret it. February 26, 2018, Winnipeg gets Paul Stastny. St. Louis gets Eric Foley, a 2018 first, which became Rasmus Sandin. Of course, he's a Toronto prospect. That draft pick was traded to Toronto. And a 2020 fourth-round pick. So, it's expensive, But when you look at it, you go, yeah, Sandin would probably be a pretty good prospect for Winnipeg to have, but you can understand they were going for that second line center. June 30th, 2018, Winnipeg gets Simone Bourque. Montreal gets Yoel Armia, Steve Mason, a 2019 7th, and a 2020 4th. Basically, Mason's going to get bought out, so they trade him to Montreal so Montreal can do it. And in order to sweeten the pot so Montreal's willing to do it, they give up Armia. Could be a huge, huge mistake as soon as now. Armia, really honestly, for me with Montreal, I know the stats don't back it up. I think he had a very good year, and I think the upside is still there. And I think he could surprise some people this year. We'll see. But honestly, I think that's a trade that you look back on, and as soon as next summer, we might look back at that and go, man, if they could have included somebody else, that Armia looks like a real keeper. Now, February 25th, 2019, Winnipeg gets Nathan Beaulieu in exchange for Buffalo getting a 2019 6th. So very, very low price for Beaulieu to go to the Jets. That same day, February 25th, 2019, Winnipeg acquires Kevin Hayes, that elusive second-line center that they've been seeking for years. Brendan Lemieux and a 2019 first are the price that are paid by the Winnipeg Jets. And that hurts. Honestly, it does. Because they'll pay again to get that first-round draft pick back. June 3rd, 2019, Winnipeg gets a 2019 fifth. Philadelphia gets Kevin Hayes. So they get a fifth-round pick for Kevin Hayes, who they acquired in exchange for a first and Brendan Lemieux. They get that first round back on June 17th, 2019 from the Rangers with Neil Pionk in exchange for Jacob Trouba. Trouba, who only wanted to go to the Rangers, wanted to sign there. And so Winnipeg kind of backed into a corner. They make the trade, and Trouba's now a Ranger, and we'll see if Pionk is able to recover from last season's really kind of scary numbers. His advanced stats weren't great. Just throwing that out there. But I think the potential is still there. The issue is that Winnipeg has definitely eroded their blue line a bit, and if they're missing both Laine and Connor this coming season for any stretch of time, we could be having quite the different history video a couple years from now when I do this series again. The Jets are one of the top, I think we can all agree, top 3 teams in Canada when it comes to likely to win a Stanley Cup first. I think we can put Toronto in there, and then some people could argue Montreal. You might be able to argue Calgary. But Winnipeg should definitely be in that top 3 spot. And some may argue Edmonton as well. Got to throw that in there. But hey, they're run better now in Winnipeg than they were in Atlanta. You can see where they still make some moves that might be head scratchers. But in general, Winnipeg's biggest issue has been that number 2 center spot. And we'll see whether or not they get that resolved from within this year, or if they make another move at the deadline to try to shore that up, or what happens. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And before I go, the remaining Thrashers still with this team: Dustin Byfuglien, Brian Little, and Blake Wheeler. So they're all prominent players on this team. Little's the one that people complain shouldn't be second-line center and should be third. From the 2011 NHL draft, Mark Scheifele and Adam Lowry stand out as guys who are original Jets. Original Jets from this go-around. And I'm aware that there were Jets previous to these Jets. That's a franchise that moved on to Arizona. And I only make this argument because I think that if you look at it, their history since they went to Arizona, not fantastic. And not only that, but I think this Winnipeg Jets team that wears this jersey is closer to being a Stanley Cup champion than the original Winnipeg Jets from the 70s and 80s ever were. They were Avco Cup champs in the WHA, but they were never really close to NHL champions on any level. I don't recall anybody ever picking them to win a Stanley Cup. And so this incarnation of the Winnipeg Jets, capable of doing something special, and we may see them do it as soon as this coming season, because nobody's expecting it. Last summer, everybody's saying, oh, okay, right, Winnipeg, this is going to be their year, and then it didn't happen. So maybe a year later it does. So we'll see, and we'll see how many of these players end up playing a major role in the Winnipeg Jets becoming champions if/when it happens. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you for your support. I'll talk to you again soon.